All right, John. Well, thanks a lot for stopping by the booth today. I know we've recorded, I think, 3 podcasts together now.
I think you're right.
Yeah, which doesn't seem like it, but I looked back and it was, I know we talked leading up to the election for the NRA Board of Directors. We talked on a number of occasions, but this is the first time that we have actually met in person.
It is.
And the first time we've spoken since you were elected to the NRA Board of Directors.
You're absolutely correct. And as of tomorrow afternoon, even though I won't be sworn in, I will be a member of the board.
Yeah. So congratulations, I think.
I think is the best way to put it.
So, in all seriousness, congratulations. I know that you are well deserving of that position, and I think have the right ideas in mind to try to turn the organization around.
We're trying. We're going to have a long way to do it, but we need to give members a reason to come back. We need to build value into their membership. It's not just selling it on $18.71, which is a nice idea, but give people a reason to join the NRA. The fact that we're fighting for their rights, whether they're in a club and we provide their insurance. There's a whole number of different avenues to bring people in because they're competitors. Now, I'm not a competitor. I've never pretended to be a competitor, but it's a way to get people involved. And we need to what I really think we need to do is start to appeal to people of your generation, the millennials, the Gen Zs, the even. It's nice to see. I'm looking at the board and I'm thinking, I'm not that young, and I think I'm in the younger half of the board. So, but we need to do stuff that give people a reason, whether it is we've drawn a line in the sand, we're not going to cross it, we're not going to compromise, whatever, give people a reason that they want to join the NRA.
Yeah. Now, I know you followed the litigation in New York fairly closely.
I did.
The litigation brought against the NRA by the New York Attorney General, Letitia James. And obviously, there was a lot of fallout from that. There were lots of things revealed about the NRA that were, I would say, made a lot of members either not renew or lose faith in the organization to some degree. So it's one thing to try to attract new members, right? The younger generation. It's another to try to restore trust in the people who lost that trust because of the things that were revealed through that litigation. If you would, tell us a little bit about what was revealed through that litigation, what efforts are being made to fix those issues, and what can the NRA do to restore the trust that was lost with many of the members that have left the organization?
There were a number of things. And probably the most egregious were the private jets for Wayne LaPierre, his wardrobe or whatever. And it was members' money going for fluff, for lack of a better word. They were diverting the plane that was supposed to be going to Florida from D.C. out to Nebraska to pick up a niece because you wanted her to fly with you. And that was a waste of money because I don't fly in a private plane. I don't own a private plane. I fly coach. But that was revealed. And the sad thing was, as much as Tish James hated the NRA, we found that she was the one looking out for the members, the rank and file members, and she should not have been the one. Things that have changed, we did a consent decree. We have the final order. There's efforts to make it more open. We have a chief compliance officer who is protected in the sense that while he could only be fired for cause, and by that I mean he does something wrong, he could be fired. But if we just fire him, we owe him 2 years' salary. So there's this financial incentive to protect him, and that's good. They're working on policies and procedures, stuff like making sure that there are no exceptions to fly. And you can't fly first class just because you're some board member that's more favored than another. We fly coach. Do you need to fly? Is this something? Here's a perfect example. Traditionally, the NRA board meetings have been here at the annual meeting, one in September and one in January. Well, quite often the September meeting or the January meeting was held in Dallas or Anchorage or some place that might be very nice to visit. They're going to be in Fairfax. We don't have to transport staff to Dallas. We don't have to transport staff to Anchorage. They're there. They can answer questions. They can do their job. And then we're not paying for their hotel. We're not paying for jet flights. So I mean, that's a savings that we needed to do.
Yeah, and the NRA is one thing that's unique and what's always been so that's differentiated the NRA from the Bloomberg sorts of groups, right, is that the NRA gets its power, gets its influence, gets its money from the members. It's a grassroots organization.
Everybody you see around here. And I'm very pleased with the attendance. And if it's this good today, I think tomorrow might be even better.
And the problem is that the NRA was entrusted with using those dollars that they collected from their membership and tasked with using those dollars in a way that was beneficial to their members.
Exactly. I'll be honest, I wouldn't care if we had meetings in the Comfort Inn or a Quality Inn, someplace that's safe with a boardroom. That's fine by me. It doesn't have to be a 5-star hotel. They were doing stuff in the Ritz-Carlton. You were staying in private suites, stuff that just was not an efficient or good use of money.
Yeah, and it was not an efficient use of money, and it wasn't used in a way that was beneficial to the membership, right? And the private flights, the sort of channeling of personal expenses through third parties for personal benefit, those had nothing to do with benefiting the NRA membership. And that's why these compliance efforts that you've been outlining are so important, because the NRA's got to, I think, become more transparent about how those dollars are being used to regain the trust of its membership to either come back or to become new members.
Absolutely right. And when you think about it, it's much easier to sell an existing client than to go out and get a new one. Yeah. And that's basically what we're having to do. But it goes beyond just saving money and compliance efforts. I sat in on the Legislative Policy Committee yesterday, and there were a couple of resolutions that said that we need to stop undercutting the gun groups that are non-NRA affiliated. For example, in New Hampshire, there was a big issue because all the gun groups were against one certain piece of legislation, and the NRA decided for whatever reason that they were going to be neutral, and then they were helping to modify the legislation to make it more palatable. If it's bad legislation, don't make it easier to pass. The other thing that I do see, and I do think this is good, is on litigation. The newer ILA head of litigation, Joe Greenlee, is very much so a Second Amendment scholar. But instead of the NRA being the lone wolf going in on their own, they're sharing the load with other like-minded Second Amendment organizations, whether it's SAF, the Firearms Policy Coalition, NSSF, or whomever. And so the more you can make that litigation money go, the better.
Yeah, and I can attest that Joseph Greenlee is an incredible scholar, an advocate for the Second Amendment. I heard him speak on a number of occasions at the NRA annual legal seminar that they host on Friday. Actually, today it's going on right now, as a matter of fact. I'm normally there, but I'm here today for the first time. I'm not at the legal seminar, and he's spoken there on a number of occasions. I think he works closely, or did work closely, with Dave Koppel, who's also a great Second Amendment scholar and advocate for the right.
And I saw Dave in the hallway yesterday, so I know he's here.
Yeah, Dave literally wrote the law school textbook on the Second Amendment.
He did.
Yeah, and so if you've got an interest in that, by the way, it's not cheap, but it's the treatise on the Second Amendment, essentially.
And I can proudly say he took something from my blog, a graphic. He asked me for permission to reproduce it way back when. And
nice.
I was like, I'm in there.
Well, before you were on the board of directors, that was your claim to fame.
That was my claim to fame. That, and what seems to be that so much of NRA staff reads my blog.
Yeah. Well, you have, like I said, you covered the trial closely, but you've also kept up with other things about the NRA and the Second Amendment. So you've got a good, and speaking of your blog, I want to talk about that a little bit. You run Only Guns and Money.
Yes.
And the preface to that is no lawyers, only guns and money.
No lawyers, because it was based on the song Some Lawyers, Guns and Money, and I was not a lawyer. I was a financial planner in a prior life. So I said, yeah, just make it guns and money.
Yeah, yeah. So only guns and money. And I can't recall off the top of my head, is it .org or .com?
.com.
.com. Okay. I've been following your work there for quite some time. And as you say, the NRA, a lot of the people in charge keep tabs on it because it's sort of got a good pulse on what's going on at the NRA.
I think you're right. So, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so if you would tell us a little bit more, what started, how did you start the blog? How has it evolved over the years? I assume that blog is really what led to your eventual election into the board of directors. So,
I think I would give it a lot of credit.
Yeah.
It got started in 2010. I've been an avid blog reader, especially on 2A blogs, and that was the golden age of blogging. And I said, I think I can do this. And I had a little post here, a little post there, and it started building and building and building, and it just kind of grew over time.
Yeah.
And as other blogs fell by the wayside, I kept going.
I don't remember how I found your blog initially. Did you do anything to promote it, or did you just write and people found your work?
You might have found it because I was also a co-host on the Polite Society podcast.
Okay. There's a good chance of that because I did meet Paul. Actually, I was introduced to Paul, not in person, but he was on Gun Talk with Tom Gresham, talking about an armed defense incident that he was involved in. And yes.
Where's Charlie?
Charlie was here from noon to 3.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, and I'll be here. I'm Alex Dooley.
I'm Jesse Wright.
Nice to meet you. I'll be here.
Sean Richardson, we're part of the team.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'll be.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I see that. Very good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome to the family.
Thank you.
We'll be here from 3 to 6 today, the Forge of Freedom podcast. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I met Charlie at the Great American Outdoor Show.
Okay, nice.
We follow each other on Facebook. And we said, somebody says, I know you. And I said, yeah, I know you.
Yeah, Charlie's a great guy. Yeah. But anyway, no, we're not affiliated. We're friends, but we're not affiliated in any way. So just we're live, but it's okay. You're not being recorded, but yes, it's okay. I was glad you stopped by. It was nice to meet you. Yes, thank you. So I bet you're right, though. Getting back to the Polite Society, that I found you through the Polite Society podcast.
Probably, and I know and that led to probably around 2015, 2014, I became a speaker on using new media to advance gun rights at the Gun Rights Policy Conference.
Oh, nice.
And I did that for 5, 6, 7 years.
Okay. And Gun Rights Policy Conference, for those who don't know, is an event that's put on by the Second Amendment Foundation.
Yep.
It, much like the NRA annual meeting, it moves around to various venues from year to year, but it has a lot of the top experts in the right to keep and bear arms, and particularly the legal aspects of the right to keep and bear arms and litigation at the state level, but also at the federal level as well.
I would say so.
Yeah.
And a lot of Second Amendment scholars in general.
Okay. And so did you get invited to that after you'd started the Only Guns and Money?
Well, I started going to it in 2010 when it was actually held just outside of San Francisco, of all places.
Oh, interesting.
And then I started going as much as I could. 1 year, I got to meet Otis McDonald in 2012. There were a couple years I had to miss. There was one that was going to be in Chicago, and then some guy had a psychotic episode and started cutting all the wires to the radar systems, and so you couldn't get a plane to Chicago if you paid for it. So, but I started going, I got to know the Gottliebs, and then they started inviting me.
Okay, nice. So, well, that's quite an honor to get to speak at that. That I think sort of solidifies your expertise or your credibility, at least.
And then I think the first year I spoke, it was actually carried live on C-SPAN, so I was like, wow.
Oh, yeah.
I was on C-SPAN.
Nice. Is that still on C-SPAN, or is there a way to find?
I think in the archives you probably could find it.
Okay. All right. Well, if anybody's interested in digging back into the archives on C-SPAN for John Richardson's debut at the GRPC, it's probably there. I want to get back to the NRA a little bit. I made some notes here for our conversation about the election results
Yes.
Obviously, you won a seat, and there was more or less two parties, two camps in the election. There were some who were unaffiliated, but there was what's called the strong NRA, or some called the old guard.
We'll just call them the old guard.
The old guard.
Called the strong NRA, and then us on the reform side, which we call ourselves NRA 2.0.
Yes.
And we did very, very well. Of the 3-year seats, there were 25 up for election, and we took 17 out of 25. A lot of those people who got elected were first time, who had never served on the board before. And a lot were on the ballot merely by petition, which made it even stronger. So, and then there were a handful of 2-year and 1-year seats, fill-in seats, and we took 2 more of those, and we'll know sometime tomorrow if we took the 76th director.
And the NRA 2.0 group is putting their support behind Charlie Hiltunen.
It's from
Indiana.
From Indiana?
Yeah, he's the president, I believe, of the Indiana State Rifle and Pistol Association. Yep. He was previously a board member, did not get elected during the main election.
Exactly right.
But there's still a seat vacant, and who is the strong NRA or the old guard running as their...
As I understand it, it's Tom King.
Okay. Tom King. And Tom King, interestingly, was the man right behind the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case and the Bruin case. Is that right?
As far as I know.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So those two people are running to fill the final NRA board of directors seat, the 76th seat, and that we'll know the results of that when.
We should know sometime tomorrow afternoon. The voting closes at the close of the meeting of members. So if the meeting goes to noon or the meeting goes to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the votings will stay open. And then sometime after that, we'll know by Sunday morning, no less.
Yeah.
But I would think, all things considered, sometime late tomorrow. And asking the NRA people holding the election this morning, they thought about 500 people had already voted, so that's good news.
That seems like a lot compared to previous elections.
I think it is. We've been pushing for people to support Charlie, and I'm sure the old guard has been pushing, to support Tom King, and there are some of the NRA 2.0 candidates, such as Todd Vandermeide and Frank Tate, who unfortunately did not get elected, have stepped aside and said, we want you to support Charlie.
Yeah, which is admirable that they would step aside like that.
Yeah.
And, of course, Frank Tate was on the board previously as well.
Not for long,
but he was running as a NRA 2.0 candidate this time around. And I know he was an advocate, and I'd like to get into this a little bit. Well, and before we do, let me back up. So NRA 2.0 won 17 of the 25
17
seats.
Of the 25.
And I assume the other seats were won by either strong NRA or unaffiliated.
No, there were no unaffiliated.
No unaffiliated.
Were either strong NRA or NRA 2.0.
Okay.
Anybody who what I call was in no man's land, none of them got elected, and they tended to be at the very tip end of the ballot.
Okay. So how does that change the balance of the overall board of directors? So only 25 were up for election. There are 76 total board of directors elected in 3-year cycles,
right,
in 25-person intervals.
I would say that it should, if it doesn't give us a supermajority, we're very close to it, of reformers.
Okay. And, of course, we'll get a better sense for that. Maybe tomorrow at the membership meeting, but certainly Monday. In terms of when the board fills officer positions and other committee positions.
And we're running, and there was a little, I don't want to say controversy, but people wanted to be the candidates for the NRA 2.0, and they worked it out, and they're running a team with Bill Pockenberg, who's first vice president and now for president, Mark Vaughn, who's currently the second vice president, running for first, and then Rocky Marshall would then fill in the position for second vice president.
Okay. So I know one of the things when we were talking about restoring trust in the organization, I would include myself in this group. A lot of people have been hesitant to donate money to the NRA until they're confident that the NRA has made significant steps toward reform. What sorts of priorities do you have, and do some of the other, I know the NRA 2.0 group is not a monolithic group with everybody having the same ideas.
Correct.
But what are some of the priorities that you have and that NRA 2.0 have to restore that trust?
One of the first things that I would like to see is more transparency rather than the NRA being some sort of black box where money is put in and you might get something out. I will be introducing a resolution tomorrow that will call for bylaws, board minutes, and a list of the directors being put online. And number one, it's going to save money, but if you want to get bylaws now, you have to print, you have to call in or write in, and they have to mail you a little pamphlet. It'd be so much easier just keep it as a PDF file online and print up very few copies of it. And the second thing, I think we need to investigate doing live streaming of our board meetings. Look how easy it is for you to do recorded video using a phone and microphones and a laptop. If small towns can do it, there is no excuse for the NRA not to be able to do it. We don't have to have expensive equipment. We could just use YouTube, for lack of a better word, and have it go out on YouTube, which would also give us an archive. If we go into executive session, then you turn off the camera, you go to a screen that says executive session. So it's doable, and I think the more people can see that what the board is doing as opposed to just rumors, so much the better. The other thing is you have committees that meet 3 times a year. When you're dealing with stuff that's important like legislative policy or legal affairs or trying to build membership, meeting 3 times a year just doesn't cut it. And you do not have to go and meet in a location. You can do Zoom, you can do WebEx or anything like that. I can't tell you how many meetings I had using WebEx or Microsoft Teams or Zoom in business with clients during COVID, or even now when we're doing it for our local chapter of Dallas Safari Club once a month, and before going into our gala once a week. But we were doing it on Zoom, and it works. And you can see the other person, you hear them. So there's no excuse of not making it easy and using the technology that's out there.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like I said earlier, we need to show value for your money. What do you get for your $35 or $45? What do you get if you're a life member? Is it just a magazine? Well, you can probably find a deal on guns and ammo, which will be a good article, and what you see in the American Rifleman will probably be just as good. But we need to do more than that. We need to marry that and prove to people that we are fighting for their rights. And that, more than anything, to me, given that we are the largest Second Amendment organization, if you put all the other groups, whether it's NACR, the Firearms Policy Coalition, Second Amendment Foundation, anybody who's a member or even an affiliate, it's still less than the NRA. We used to be considered the 800-pound gorilla. We need to be that again. And we're not going to bring people back by always, trying to find a compromise. We're going to have to say, sometimes we're going to have to be hardcore and say, no, we are not compromising. And if you vote against this bill, we are going to report to our members that you voted against this bill, and no, you're not going to get an A rating.
I'm glad you brought that up, because speaking of other organizations, Firearms Policy Coalition, Second Amendment Foundation, Gun Owners of America, NAGR, etc., as you said, even if you combine all of those, it doesn't match the NRA in terms of its size and its influence, at least the influence that it did have. It's waned a bit in recent years.
Correct.
Hopefully the NRA can get back to that. But even still, in its weakened state, the NRA is much larger than those organizations.
Figures somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 million, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less.
Yeah.
Those are members. Those are not just people on a mailing list.
Yeah.
That's actual members.
As people who pay money to
or
be part
have
of the
paid.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Right. And historically, the NRA has engaged in a bit of sort of a turf war in terms of its influence in the Second Amendment. And I've heard from you and from others I know on the board that the NRA should collaborate with. We're all on the same team in terms of protecting the right to keep and bear arms, and it should be more cooperative with those organizations in terms of fighting against the anti-gun agenda.
I could not agree more. We need to find where we can work together. We may not need to be as in your face sometimes as FPC is on Facebook with
or X,
dropping the F-bombs. We're not going to be dropping F-bombs.
They don't
Even though I might say
content.
it privately, I'm not going to do it online.
Yeah.
But there's no reason not to work with them. And especially litigation, we're starting to do it. We need to work with them on more than just litigation. Not just the other major national groups. We need to work with non-affiliated NRA clubs and associations that are fighting for Second Amendment rights at the local and state level. I saw Philip Van Cleef just a moment ago walking by with the Virginia Citizens Defense League. You have the Arizona Citizens Defense League. North Carolina, you have Grassroots North Carolina. We are not NRA affiliated, but we are all fighting for the Second Amendment.
Yeah, and you brought up FPC and their approach on social media. The people who care about the right to keep and bear arms, they fall under a wide tent.
Yes,
right?
we do.
It's a much more diverse group of people than what many outsiders, what many people who perceive the NRA to be, and the people who care about the right to keep and bear arms are. And there's room for lots of different types of people, lots of people who have various preferences, but those various, what we all care about is the right to keep and bear arms.
Absolutely.
And to the extent that we can work together, the better.
I'll be fairly blunt. I think if we start saying that there's a red line that we will not cross, if we show people that we are serious about protecting the Second Amendment, not only will we bring back members, we will bring back younger members, and we desperately need younger members.
Yeah.
We will get members from competition, or they belong to what's called a 100% club, though that, to be honest, a lot of clubs don't even enforce that. I mean, we need members, we need money, but we need members. I mean, the power of the NRA when it comes to lobbying is we can look at a congressman, we can look at a senator and say, we are going to be your margin of victory. We will bring you 2% extra votes, and that may be all you needed.
Yeah. The NRA should, and this gets to the theme of the podcast, the Forge of Freedom. The idea is that we preserve our liberty, we preserve our ability to exercise our individual rights from the ground up, from the grassroots, and that we don't get our rights from the top down. They don't come from the government. They don't come from some organization or some person. They're God-given. They're inherent to our humanity. They're inalienable, and we have to preserve them from the grassroots, from the bottom up. And the NRA needs to get back to that mentality.
And part of it is going to be a culture change. Traditionally, NRA through ILA, Institute for Legislative Action, has worked on relationships and worked behind closed doors. Sometimes you just need to get in the politician's face. And it's like, well, you said nasty things about me. Yeah, and you voted along with the anti people. I want to say we need to, it's not a conservative or liberal or progressive thing. The Second Amendment is a civil right that we need to protect. And I don't care I don't care if you're gay, I don't care if you're straight, trans, whatever. I don't care if you like abortion, hate abortion. That's not what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the Second Amendment. And we can all support that, even if we don't support other politicians on a personal basis. It doesn't matter. There used to be Second Amendment Democrats, and we need to bring them back. I'm not sure if we can, but we need to.
Speaking of that, I'm going to be talking with your good friend, David Yamani, here in just a couple of hours.
Yeah.
He describes himself as a liberal sociology professor, but he cares very deeply about the right to keep and bear arms.
He does.
And he strives to show that guns are normal and normal people own guns. And I think does a great job of trying to bridge the divide between left and right in terms of political ideology. Because like you say, this is not about left and right. This is about the right to self-defense, the right to self-preservation, and that's something that all of us have in common.
And David has got We have a book club that David has organized, and right now we're reading a book by a professor at the University of Chicago named Jens Ludwig, and he's trying to make the case for gun control. He hasn't made it yet. But in the group, you have people that are NRA members. You have people that are gun trainers. There's a young lady who's a podcaster for the Brady campaign, and we're all civil. We discuss the book, and there could be things that I'm like, I hate this book. And I'm not going to say this is the worst book I've ever read, but, we work together, we discuss it rationally, calmly. I know there's a guy that was on it, an older guy, ponytail, beard, NRA Life member, voted for me.
Great. Yeah, and I love that book club that David's been doing for it's a number of books by this point that he's organized. Yeah. It's an incredible amount of work, but I think extremely valuable for the people who participate.
And what we tend to do is every 2 weeks read X number of chapters, and then on the fourth, we finish up the book, and if we're lucky, and we have been, the author comes on and can ask questions. We ask questions of the author.
Yeah.
And it's like, why did you write this? Tell me about your grandmother's gun and stuff like that.
Yeah, neat. One comment you made earlier, and I think is an important point, that a lot of people have concerns about with respect to the NRA. FPGOA, for instance, sort of fashioned themselves as the no-compromise gun organizations, gun rights organizations, individual rights organizations.
Exactly.
For a while, the NRA sort of had this reputation of being willing to compromise, being willing to give up something so that something worse doesn't happen. For instance, the bump stock ban. And there are others, of course, other examples. Has there been any discussion amongst the NRA 2.0 group about what sort of approach the NRA should take with respect to the right to keep and bear arms? Because I understand that lobbying and getting the votes required in Congress is sometimes a tricky issue, but does it necessarily mean that we have to compromise on the right to keep and bear arms?
That's a good point. Yesterday, I attended the Legislative Policy Committee, and Jeff Knox, who is part of the reform movement, absolutely brought up a resolution that said, here are our stated goals, our mission and what we believe in. We need to stop. If you work for the NRA and you start negotiating on to reduce any of these rights, you need to stop it, or you may need to find a job elsewhere. Now, I think it was pretty polemic, but most of us agreed, whether we were more the old guard or the more hardcore reformers. We have a mission statement, and we need to help preserve some of what we say we stand for, and that was part of it.
Yeah, and the other component to that, I mentioned the bump stock ban. One thing, I'll just give an example from Indiana. You mentioned the grades that the NRA gives to politicians. They do that, and it's been an incredible resource, especially at the state level. So you could get a barometer on what position certain politicians took with respect to the right to keep and bear arms. The problem that in the way that it was implemented, at least in Indiana, is that you could have these Republicans who would express publicly support for the right to keep and bear arms, but then through the legislative process would avoid bringing an issue to a vote publicly and try to kill legislation behind closed doors in committee. And that would not be considered as part of the NRA's grade. So that way they could keep their A rating with the NRA. They could keep their A rating with the NRA, but nevertheless vote against or work against the right to keep and bear arms behind closed doors.
And I think you find that in every state, unfortunately, and especially in states where, let's say, there's a strong Republican majority. They're gonna mouth the platitudes that, I support the Second Amendment. I'm a hunter. We all know that Second Amendment isn't about deer or duck hunting, though they're very important, but it's not about that.
Yeah.
It's about preserving our right to keep and bear arms and facing a tyrannical government.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll never get, it's like, I'm going to bury my guns. Like, if it's time to bury your guns, it's time to
use them. Yeah.
Time to use them.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's hard. The leaders now of ILA are all younger. I would put them 40 and younger, but a lot of them came up when they were trained on how to negotiate. And like I said, it's hard to change a culture,
But
a corporate culture.
the problem that lots of people see, as I know you do too, is that when you compromise, it's sort of death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we lose our rights little by little. I like Tom Gresham's just sitting across the aisle here from us with Gun Talk. The way he puts it on his radio show is that, okay, we'll compromise. Which gun laws do you want to get rid of? We have way too many.
I mean, I remember picking up a T-shirt at some NRA meeting. That was a group that was trying to make changes called NRA Not Really Activists, and there was more truth than fiction to that.
Yeah. Well, John, I really appreciate you taking the time to stop by.
Thank you.
We've got another guest on the way, and I want to give you an opportunity here at the end. Plug your blog one more time, because I know that'll change a little bit since you've been elected, but you're still going to keep it active, right?
I will still keep it active. I will, in order to do my fiduciary duties, my duty of care, obedience, and loyalty to the NRA as a board member, there are certain things I'm not going to be able to report on. If I get confidential information, it's got to stay confidential. In the past, if somebody slipped it to me and it became public domain, I had no problem going with it. Now I'm kind of constrained. It is what it is. And I know that's not going to make certain people happy, but I had preached fiduciary duties for too long to step away from it.
Yeah. Well, we haven't lost your valuable resource of Only Guns and Money. So you're going to continue to contribute. You'll just be somewhat limited by what you can report on there.
I mean, I can still report on litigation going on in the courts. I can still report on what's going on in the firearms industry. For example, I just did a story beginning of the week about one of the smaller AR manufacturers closing its doors because they couldn't compete on price anymore. So, I mean, stuff like that's not going to go away. So we'll see.
Well, John, thanks again for stopping by again. Everybody, John Richardson, the man behind OnlyGunsAndMoney.com, and newly elected member of the board of directors.
I'm a director-elect until I become a director tomorrow.
That's right. Okay. All right. Well, tomorrow's the official day. So congratulations and thanks again.
Thank you very much.
It was good to see you, John.
You too.
All right, everybody. I'm going to put this on pause, on mute for just a moment, and we'll be on with David Conte here in just a little bit.